some people think replay should be a backstop to make the game officiated perfectly. And nobody really wants that. They say they want that, but they don't. We would impede on the game too much. So really, the challenge we have right now, especially in college football, we've taken our replay and we introduced collaborative replay. Now collaborative has evolved to more of a centralized replay. Where do we want it to go? Where do we need it to go next? Without impeding too much on the game, we want to keep the game moving, but get those major impacts that truly impact the game. Those are the type calls that we want. So I think replay is always going to be a work in progress. How far you can go with not impeding too far on the game, but getting those big calls. We have honorable people, okay? I think a lot of times people don't recognize that we have honorable people. There are mistakes that are going to be made, but we're working every day, every fiber of our bodies to, be better, improve our game, because the game gets tougher to officiate. It gets faster. The athletes are incredible, but the officials are working kind of as we hit at the very front. I mean, they're working, I say starting in May, but I mean, it was well before that. And they're working to absolutely find out how good they can be, but there are going to be mistakes. And we want to be as transparent as we can when there's a significant error, and we try to do that. I'm very proud of our football officiating manual, and it's very good. And it really lists out a crew of 8, a crew of 7, and then kind of supplemental mechanics for a crew of 6. Really good resource for younger officials, but we encourage even the experienced guys we all stay in the rule book. You got to stay in your mechanics manual also.
And now, season 2, episode 12, letter J, Judgment. Join hosts Dana Pappas with special guest Steve Shaw on the From A to Zebra podcast.
Welcome back to the From A to Zebra podcast. I'm Dana Pappas. Summer is upon us, and football fans are awaiting the start of a new season, so it's exciting to bring a guest to the show who is an expert in football officiating to talk about a very important topic in our world. On this episode, we are talking about the letter J and the word judgment in officiating, which is one of the key elements to being a great sports official. Having judgment is critical to the success of an official, in addition to knowing the rules and mechanics of each sport. Judgment is something that's not really found in a book, but it's something that develops with repetition and experience. Our guest on this episode to talk about judgment is Steve Shaw. Steve is currently the National Coordinator of College Football Officiating and the Secretary Editor of the NCAA Football Rules Committee. Prior to his current position, Steve was the coordinator of officials for the SEC and the Sun Belt Conference. He worked 21 years on the field as an NCAA football referee, including 15 in the SEC and 6 at the Division II level. In addition to all of that, as if that wasn't enough, Steve worked the BCS championship game in 2000 and 2005 and officiated 6 other BCS bowl games as well, including 3 Rose Bowls, 2 Fiesta Bowls, and the 2010 Orange Bowl. He also officiated 4 SEC championship games in 1997, 98, 2001, and 2006. Welcome to the show, Steve, and thank you so much for taking time to join us. We know you're extremely busy getting ready for the 2025 college football season, which is one of my most favorite times of the year, so thank you so much for being on the show.
Dana, it's my pleasure, and you're right. I think most fans don't realize, but we're full go right now. The season has really started for officiating.
Does it ever actually end? I don't think that it does.
No, it's amazing now. I mean, our season this year with the expanded CFP went a little longer. We had a rules committee in February, into February, and then spring, the scrimmages, spring games, although spring games are kind of, I'm not sure what the future is going to be there. And then we're doing camps and clinics. And now, I actually started in May with all our officials. Every week we have either a quiz or a preseason training video, and we break it down to, like, the first one was rule changes, and then we talked about targeting and personal fouls. Our next one up is going to be unsportsmanlike conduct. So every week they're either getting from the national office, they're getting a quiz or a preseason video, and that's on top of what each conference is doing. So your fans should know your officials are working hard right now.
They are. And I think I love that you brought that up right at the beginning of the show because those are things that people don't know. People don't understand that officials are doing all of this in the off season. And, from the sounds of things, you had about 5 minutes off between the end of the season and the start of the next one. So we know you're working hard. And I think that that's great information because part of this podcast is really to educate people about what officials do before they're out on the field. It's not they don't just run out there. There's a lot of preparation that goes into it. And we're going to talk about some of that on this episode. And I love that you open with that. So we appreciate the early insight into the world of an official. So, before we get really into the topic of the day, we mentioned some of your background in officiating in your introduction. But can you tell us about how you got started in officiating and really kind of your path to where you are now?
Well, like everybody, I started actually after I graduated from college. I got a job with AT&T and moved to Birmingham, Alabama, and started doing high school officiating. And, I loved it. It was a lot of fun. It was a way to stay involved in the game. But something really significant for me, at least in that first year, I met my mentor. General Dick Burleson was my mentor in officiating, and on a chance meeting, we were working. We were working a Pee Wee game, and there's only 3 officials, right? And so all 3 of us were first year guys, and we kind of looked at each other, and then one of them said, "Okay, Shaw, you're the referee," and so I was the referee. We worked. It was like an 80-pound game. It wasn't for the championship of the world or anything, but it was our first year. We were into it. And so General Dick Burleson was there. He had a nephew playing in the game. And at halftime, the teams just kind of go to their end zone. There's no locker rooms and all that. And we just went to the sideline. We were, on one of the team benches, and we saw this guy coming down, and we recognized General Burleson was a longtime SEC official. And so he introduced himself to the crew. But he pulled me aside. He said, I love the way you work and you move and how you're handling the game. And through that chance meeting, he really became my mentor and helped me kind of navigate my officiating career. Not as much about, where to stand to call roughing the passer, but more about what you need to be doing, what, camps and clinics or scrimmages, who you need to meet. So that was really instrumental. And I would say that to young officials, get a great mentor that can help you kind of navigate outside the field in officiating.
Gosh, that's so important. The shout out to mentors, I always love that on this show because we all have roots somewhere. And I think talking about that and taking the time to honor the people that got us to where we are is great. And, I always tell officials, you never know where you're going to get seen. You were at a Pee Wee football game, and this individual who is prominent in the officiating industry sees you and likes the way you worked before you probably even really knew what you were doing. So I just, there's opportunity everywhere, and you never know who's watching. You never know who's going to come down and take you under their wing. So you have to be open to that opportunity because it's critical in officiating, and it isn't about all the on-field stuff. It's all the other things that you can't find in a book that I think mentors are really, really integral in officials' careers.
Well said.
So, Steve, you've had obviously an incredible career both on the field and in leadership positions within college football officiating. You've also done some pretty incredible things behind the scenes that a lot of people may not know about. Part of this includes a revamp of the Football Officials Mechanics Manual. Can you tell us a little bit about what spurred the overhaul of that publication for you?
Yeah, great question. So when I was still on the field, every conference had their own kind of supplemental mechanics manual. And so that obviously led to different conferences working a little different. And, our game's such a national game now. We've got to be together. And so my first year as a coordinator, we had this national mechanics book. In fact, I've got the new latest and greatest version of it, out but so Rogers Redding at that time, when I first came in, Rogers was moving to the national coordinator. Dave Perry was the existing, so there was some overlap. But I went to Rogers and said, hey, I'm coming fresh off the field, and I would tell you this national book, we don't look at it. It's outdated. It's like it's written in the 70s, and, it had like 4 pages on how to dig out a fumble, but it didn't have the things we needed. So I just stepped up and said, hey, I volunteer to help, overhaul this book and make it relevant. And so he said, well, it's so close to the start of the season, that would be a monumental task. So he said, let's start with, that first season, let's just start with our officiating principles. and so we kind of went through that, and we had a small committee. But then the next year, we did a complete overhaul of the book, and every coordinator participated, but Terry McCauley, who's now a TV guy, but he was a coordinator. So he and myself and Don Lucas, who was the Sunbelt coordinator, we spent a lot of time with our other coordinators, and then together ourselves. We spent time. We went like 4 days and huddled up in a hotel, and we really redid the book. And I'm very proud of the book now, because we had something to build on now, rather than having to rewrite everything, just what changes year to year. And the book is very good now, very solid. We had probably 5 or 6 minor tweaks coming into this year. So I'm very proud of our football officiating manual, and it's very good. And it really lists out a crew of 8, a crew of 7, and then kind of supplemental mechanics for a crew of 6. Really good resource for younger officials, but we encourage even the experienced guys, we all stay in the rule book. You got to stay in your mechanics manual also.
Man, that's a massive undertaking to overhaul something like that. And I think that's something that the audience we have for this podcast, some of them are officials, but some of them are just, sports fans or people who know us and just want to know what we're doing. And I think that a lot of people don't understand that there's a book that really talks about, where do you stand? What are your coverage areas? What are your keys? All of those things. Because I think sometimes if you're watching a game on TV and you don't understand what an official should be doing or where he should be standing, you're going to always make these statements that it's just because you don't know any better. You don't know where the official's supposed to be looking at a given play. So if, that manual, and I've seen it and it's outstanding, there's a lot in there and it's a lot to learn. But that had to be just a massive, massive project. So kudos for being a part of that, because those are the things that make officiating better. So that's exciting stuff.
And I appreciate you saying that, but I think what it's done, over and above all that, it's now given us something that all conferences can be together, because like I said, it is a national game, and the Big Ten can't work different than the Big 12 or the SEC or the ACC. I mean, we've got to all be together, and this book helps us get there.
Right. And that's even at our level at high school. You'll hear in certain states, well, we don't do that this way here. Well, wait a second. You're using the same book. You should all be doing the same thing regardless of what your zip code is. So it's,
exactly.
We talk so much. 2 words we hear a lot in officiating are judgment, which we're going to talk about, and consistency. And that consistency in mechanics is just as important as the consistency in rules application and enforcement. So that's really good stuff. So we are going to kind of segue right into the topic of the day, which is judgment. So as I mentioned, we've got kind of an audience of both officials and non-officials. So can we start off with you telling us what judgment is in officiating, and what are some examples of judgment calls in football?
Yeah. So, judgment is, I think an outsider might just think that, there's certain officials that are born with great judgment and that sort of thing. And really, judgment is learned. Okay. Yes. Is it a judgment that you have to make? But, going back to our mechanics, if you're, people always talk about that's a blind referee or whatever. I think vision is way overrated as an official. If you know your movement, if you know your position, and you get yourself in the proper position at the right time, and your eyes are trained to look at the right thing, you'll make good calls. I mean, and so that's kind of the mechanics side of judgment is just as important as having this true knowledge of the rules knowledge, and what was it a hold, was it not, what did he impede that receiver? So all of those things really start with the rules knowledge, but mechanics, because if you get yourself in the right spot, you're not going to have to make this incredible judgment call from, the wrong spot. But I think the other thing is the rules really help us, from the standpoint of that, we don't want our officials to be in question, in doubt, right? But the book kind of guides us of when in question, when in doubt. I like to say when in question, not when in doubt, but that what you do. And so that's part of judgment as well. And I'll use an example. I was a referee, so I'm back there with the quarterback. One of the difficult calls is pass fumble, right? And, is that hand moving forward? Did he have firm control of the ball? All those things, man, in real time, those can be very difficult. But what has changed over time, when I first started officiating, and that was pre-replay days. In question, pass fumble, we made it incomplete because you didn't want a cheap turnover or whatever. But now that we have replay, we've kind of flipped that. When in question, let the play out. Don't kill the play and call it incomplete. So judgment is also learning what your components are from a rule perspective of when in question, this is where we want this to go. The rules are really based in, not only, like I mentioned, cheap turnover. I mean, it really bases us at a point where we want the game to be. So judgment is more than just having eagle eye looking across and say, yeah, I know he impeded that receiver. I'm putting my marker down. And the other thing I would say on judgment, and this is what's so much better today than when I started officiating, is, we always talk about officials get better in judgment in everything they do with more snaps. The more time you've seen it, if you've been in that situation. The great thing about today is we have terrific video. And that video, I don't know what the ratio is. Maybe 4 plays on video is equal to a live snap, but whatever it is, now you can do so much work training in video that can help you with your judgment. So judgment isn't just making a snap decision and you're either good at it or not. It's really a learned behavior across mechanics, rules, and experiences that help you get there.
Man, that's great stuff. And I think, I'm from the generation where I still say we need to get the game tape. And then I'm like, I just dated myself. But the fact that there's just so much video available now and officials have access to it and they don't have to wait around and hand the coach that tape at the end and be like, hey, can I get a copy of the game? There's actually tools that are available and technology available to make officials better. And talking to officials even at the high school level, but especially at your level, they watch video constantly. And it's pretty incredible the education that goes into officials at all levels, professional, college. It's, we're getting there in high school as far as having that available as well. And it's so important just to be able to see those plays, especially if it's something you haven't seen in one of your own games. So that way, when you do have it, you're not unprepared. So I definitely love the element of film and technology and how that's helped officiating. So, as we mentioned,
we kind of have coined it. I was just going to say, we've coined a term, a video junkie. And I know that's probably a bad term, but so many of our new young officials, they are just video junkies. And that is great because that gains them years of experience, through watching that video. So I agree with all your points.
That's so true. And I think one of the things that we're really trying to train at our level now is how do you watch film? Yeah, like if you watch film and you don't know what you're looking for, then it's not a very good tool. So part of that mentorship element is helping people learn how to really break down their film or break down any film to learn what they're doing. And maybe it was a positioning issue and maybe that's why they missed calls. So that's very important. So Steve, we mentioned in the introduction that judgment isn't something that's necessarily found in a rule book or an official's manual. And you touched on some of this a little bit, but how can rules and mechanics really help officials to make those good judgment calls? So you talked a little bit, but if you can kind of expound on that.
Yeah, I think that part of it is getting comfortable with your mechanics. You can't robotically work that. What you have to do is understand your mechanics, work enough plays where now you're focused on not, hey, I need to move, I need to do this. Okay, where do my eyes need to go now? That then it becomes natural. And that's where we start to see officials get better and better. We talk about young officials, they're the first year officials. I mean, they kind of, see nothing, call nothing. It's just all a blur. And then the dangerous window is now you see everything and call everything. And then ultimately where we want to get to is see everything, but then have that judgment to say, these are the things that I need to make calls on. This has an impact on the play. This is a player safety issue. So I think as you progress through that judgment, it is being able to see everything in your responsibility and then understand this is enough of impact on the play, impeding that receiver or making a holding call. All of those really come to this judgment now that is really ingrained through. Now I'm not thinking of my mechanics. I'm working the play. I'm naturally doing it. And then I can open the vision to that judgment.
That's a great description of the evolution, because I know that those first years for officials are always tough. They're, afraid to throw the flag or put air in the whistle, and then they get unafraid, and you're like, okay, okay, you can stop now. So that's a really good description of the evolution of an official, and it's dead accurate. So, Ed, you touched a little bit on this in one of your other answers, but about replay. So you've really been at the forefront of implementing and advocating for technology and officiating, including wireless crew communications, which I love, and instant replay. So how do you think conferences and leagues can really balance the use of replay while also upholding and honoring the judgment of the on-field officials?
Yeah, boy, another great question. And one of the things we're really emphasizing to our own field officials this year, we've seen a trend almost abdicating to replay. Let replay, it's targeting. We're going to let replay sort it out. And we cannot do that. You've got to make that call on the field. And so we really want that. But I think as you step back and look at replay, you kind of have to define what you want replay to be. Some people think replay should be a backstop to make the game officiated perfectly. And nobody really wants that. They say they want that, but they don't. We would impede on the game too much. So really, the challenge we have right now, especially in college football, we've taken our replay and we introduced collaborative replay. Now collaborative has evolved to more of a centralized replay. Where do we want it to go? Where do we need it to go next? Without impeding too much on the game, we want to keep the game moving, but get those major impacts that truly impact the game. Those are the type calls that we want. So I think replay is always going to be a work in progress. How far you can go with not impeding too far on the game, but getting those big calls. When we first introduced it, we basically said that with indisputable video evidence, we want to change impact calls in the game. And we've gone way beyond indisputable video. I mean, now we're looking at a blade of grass and is that shoe in or out or that ball touch? And so I think keeping to work to find that proper balance is something important from the technology, because the technology can impede on the game so much and it can almost ruin the game if we're not really balanced with it.
For sure. So that's really good insight. And in a world where, we get pressure all the time at the high school level to institute replay, and people do want the game to be perfect, but I don't think they understand what you lose if you try to make the game that perfect. Nobody wants to watch somebody reviewing replay for an entire game. That's not a lot of fun. So I love that that's constantly changing and you're always reviewing that. So kind of leads right into the next question. In my world, at the high school level, there are states that will review games at the request of school. So most of the states will limit that to the review of misapplication of rules or inappropriate conduct of an official, and they won't allow review based on an official's judgment call. From your perspective, why do you think that's an important standard?
Well, I think that, I'll start from the back end and work. I mean, so when you say a judgment call, it is that, so many times these calls can be in the eye of the beholder. And a judgment call is very difficult to say, okay, well, we're going to look at a judgment call. Well, where do you stop? I mean, okay, there was a holding in the middle of the first quarter, but it changed field position. That could have impacted. So judgment calls are a part of the game. They've been a part of a game, in college for over 150 years. So I think you have to be really careful. I think you're right on if there's a misapplication of a rule, or if there's something that is significant in the officials' mechanics or how they approach something. Yes, look at that. But just, was that a hold? Was that defensive pass interference, or was it offensive pass interference? I think that's crossing a line that's too far. But everybody wants to say, well, this call impacted the game. Okay. Well, we have coaches that think every call impacts the game, and they do have an impact, but not necessarily that. So I think you step into a very difficult circumstance when you say we're going to look at judgment calls, because where do you stop in that? And I just think that keeping it to significant errors in how we approach the play or a rule interpretation is really about as far as you want to go. I know that there can be extraordinary circumstances, and that's when hopefully the high school state uses good judgment. We've seen lawsuits, and having our courts get involved, that's a scary process. So I think that judgment calls, we're best to say, look, we got to work incessantly to get our officials better, but at some point you have to live with the call that's made on the field, outside the scope of the things we.
For sure, that it's a slippery slope, and I think that you always want to do right by the game, and you want to do right by the student athletes and all that. But like you said, when does it end? If you open that Pandora's box, then you're going to be stuck with, I think, some really unintended consequences that just aren't good for the game. So I think that it's something we talk about all the time, and I know people are just always pushing for more replay, but I don't know if that's always the answers, especially at high school. I think people don't understand how difficult it is to have good replay. So I think that, if you're talking about a JV game on a Saturday afternoon, what technology are you really going to have available? So college football has some of the most spirited fans in all of sport, which is one of the reasons why I'm such a huge college football fan myself. So what is something that you wish that fans, all of those millions of spirited college football fans, what's something that you wish they knew about judgment and officiating?
Well, first of all, those fans make our game great. I mean, there's no question. I mean, the intensity and all that. Now, sometimes with social media, it goes over the line, and we all know that. But what I would want them to know is, from an officiating perspective, with all the things we do, we don't go through all the background checks and all that. I mean, we have honorable people. Okay. I think a lot of times people don't recognize that we have honorable people. There are mistakes that are going to be made, but we're working every day, every fiber of our bodies to, be better, improve our game, because the game gets tougher to officiate. It gets faster. The athletes are incredible, but the officials are working kind of as we hit at the very front. I mean, they're working, I say starting in May, but I mean, it was well before that. And they're working to absolutely find out how good they can be. But there are going to be mistakes. And we want to be as transparent as we can when there's a significant error, and we try to do that. We certainly are with the coaches. If, when I was a coordinator, if we had as a fan might say, a horrible call, I call it, if we had an incorrect call, we're going to tell the coach, it was an incorrect call. Here's why. I mean, as important as it was incorrect, here's why. Was it a mechanic issue? How do we correct it? What will we do next time in that situation? And really work to, be as good as we can be. And that's what they do. That's how they coach their players. I mean, every now and then there's a fumble, there's an interception. How do you recover from that? What's your next step? What are you going to do? So, and I think the transparency, we've really done more and more around transparency. And I think that's so important that we really work to be transparent without here's a concern we have. And really this starts back, we started this talking about my first year in officiating. I mean, with social media and fans, even at the junior high level, certainly at high school, even Pee Wee. So a very first year official, they might make a mistake. A first year person might make a mistake. And it seems like in some of those games, they're attacked personally. There's not as much security, the intimacy there. And we have the risk of running officials out of the game before they really get their roots down. So I would ask fans to understand, if you're looking at a 80-pound Pee Wee game, one of those officials may be trying to mature themselves. So give them a little bit of slack. Now, I get it. If you're in the Michigan-Ohio State game, we're not going to get any slack, and we know that, right? So, but it's one of those things where we're really concerned about the long-term, numbers that come into officiating. And you see it in high school, the aging population of our officials, and we need younger people in, and we need fans to participate in that.
Gosh, such good points. And I think that what a lot of people don't understand is when officials make a mistake, they are harder on themselves than anybody else could possibly be. Officials don't want to make mistakes. They want to be good at what they're doing. And, it is funny though, because a little bit of grace is given to players if they fumble, coaches if they make a bad call in a game. But if an official makes a mistake, it's just, it's the worst thing ever. So I just think that human element that we allow and that grace that we give to players and coaches, sometimes fans just have a hard time extending that to officials. And you see on social media, and it's sometimes friends of mine who will just talk about how terrible the official was at their son's 8-year-old baseball game. And I'm like, yeah, and probably the umpire was 12 years old. So, like, why? What are we doing? They have to have somewhere to learn, and they're not going to be perfect right out of the gate. And if we keep riding them while they're working these games on a Sunday morning, we're going to lose them forever. And that's such a battle, just letting people understand that what officials do is hard. They're doing the best they can to prepare, and they want to be as good as the two teams and the coaches on the field, or the court or the ice. I just don't think people understand that, which is part of what we're trying to do in this podcast, is to educate people about the humanity that is involved with officiating. So I love that you brought that up. So kind of a final question, Steve. We ask all of our guests this. The From A to Zebra podcast has a mission every week to educate, elevate, and excite our listeners. So what can you tell us about officiating that helps us to accomplish this mission?
Well, there's so much in there, but I would leave one thing. So one of the things that we've done, so if you have fans that are fans of the collegiate game, the college game, so each week as the national coordinator, we do a training tape for our officials. And, in that, I use all the geeky officiating language. But we take a subset of those plays, and we really started this for our media partners, our TV announcers and the color broadcasters and all that. So we each week during the season, and now the NCAA is actually posting it on their YouTube channel. So, what I would tell you, if you're a fan, go find that. And so each week we'll have a number of plays, and you hit the words. It's really, to me, it's not about, was this a correct call or incorrect call? It's more about inform and educate. What's the rule? What's the mechanic of our officials? What are we telling them? What are our expectations on this type play? Whose call is it? How do you get help? How do you get support? How do you triangulate that to get multiple looks? So it's really, and it's short. The feedback we got, you got to keep it under 10 minutes. So it's less than 10 minutes. It's out there, and it's trying to be, inform and educate on rules and mechanics, but it's also a way to kind of open the kimono, if you will, be transparent and show plays and how our officials reacted to them and what they did. So I would tell you, I can't tell you how to go find it, but I think if you're on YouTube, you can figure it out. And it's posted every week. We'll start it from our week 0, through our last set of games before the conference championship games. And it deals with rules, mechanics, officiating standards, and why we make the calls we make and what goes into it. So I would tell you, as a fan, certainly if you're an informed fan, it's a great way to kind of learn a little bit more about not only officiating, but about the game.
Man, I love that. And a lot of times I think people get upset when they're watching sports because they don't know the rules, or they think that rules are the same at every level of sports. So they get frustrated. And I'm like, and people ask me a lot, they'll be like, oh, well, was that wrong? And I'm like, well, I don't know the college rule. Like, I know the high school rule. I don't know the college rule. I'm not the expert. So don't ask. But I think that having that available for me or any fan to be able to go and look at is important, and it's educational, and that makes people a better fan. Anytime people have that access to something that is like, it's there, it's free, they can go to YouTube, they can learn from it, they're going to be a better fan, and maybe they'll yell a little bit less. So I love that the NCAA is doing that, and I hadn't looked at it. So this season I'm gonna make sure to do that, and I'll share that out, because I have some fans who could use it.
Okay, we'll make sure you get the link and
I
do
love
share
it.
that. And
I surely will.
as a fan, to be fair to the fans, it's hard because if they go to, a Friday night high school game, there are different tweaks for the rules than the college game. And I know that's one of the great things. We've tried to work together to share information, but the NFL the same way. We work very closely with the NFL, but the rules are a little different in all three categories. And it's hard. If you're a fan, it's kind of hard to keep up. And if you know something in the NFL and you try to apply it to a high school game, it may not be so. So the video will help with that as well.
That's so true. When I was still in the state office, I remember before horse collar was a rule at the high school level, I had a coach who was insisting that the officials had missed a horse collar. And I was like, that's not a rule. At the time, it wasn't in high school. And he kept insisting it was. And I said, well, if you can find it in our rule book, I'll buy you dinner. And he never found it because it wasn't there. So I think that, people just need to understand that there are some idiosyncrasies and nuances from level to level. And I'll share out that link because I love to inform people, because I think it just makes the game less frustrating for them when they know what they're actually looking at. So I'm excited about that. I didn't know the NCAA was doing that. Kudos to you guys. That's fantastic. Well, Steve Shaw, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to join the From A to Zebra podcast. And I'm looking forward to seeing you at the NASO Summit in Montgomery, Alabama here in next month already. My goodness. I'm looking forward to that as always. And I'm sure I'll chit chat with you then, and we'll talk more about future episodes and things that maybe we should be covering on the show. So Steve, thanks for everything you do for officiating. Thanks for your time on the podcast. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on the From A to Zebra podcast. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and X for more information about the show. We'll see you next time.
Be sure to hit that like button, follow, subscribe, and also catch From A to Zebra on Instagram at from_A_2_zebra. Facebook, From A to Zebra podcast, and on X at From A to Zebra.